One difference between Asian films and Asian American films is that the Asian ones don't like exoticize being Asian because it's just norm.
With things like Parasite and Squid Game, I almost feel like they get so big because they follow what America likes. And what America likes is like horror and killing and
How can you tell the difference if a Caucasian is playing an Asian? Because you can tell by looking at their faces.
When you do have white actors playing Asian characters, not only is it offensive representation on screen, it's also denying the people who should have that role or could have that role a job.
Like, they only don't care when it like the backlash is so bad that the movie doesn't do well. That's when they're like, I'm sorry, it was a bad choice. I don't know what I was thinking, but if the movie does well, they don't care. They just like right on to the sunset.
Yeah, a lot of Asian American stuff just focuses on talking, and Asians, yeah, we don't talk.
Okay, welcome to the next Incluvie Roundtable. May is AAPI month, that's Asian American and Pacific Island month. And we're going to be focusing more on Asian American movies, and we'll talk about why and what that means. We're going to go around and introduce ourselves, the Incluvie movie critics, with name, favorite recent movie, and then upcoming movie you're looking forward to. Starting off, my name is Kathy Yee, and I love all things Aquafina, and I'm really excited for Joyride.
Hi guys, I'm Atra Palit. Everything with Ali Wong is really down my lane. So of course Beef, which came out recently, is a huge favorite. And I'm looking forward to Makoto Shinkai's Suzume no Tojimari that comes out this week.
I'm Andrew. I'm excited about all things anime, really excited about the Sailor Moon Eternal Cosmos movie coming out, and of course, any other movies that we're going to be discussing today.
I'm MG, and I mean, so many recent releases have got me excited. Several years back at this point, Crazy Rich Asians, but I feel like that kind of started this catalyst toward let's have more movies like this. Kathy already mentioned Aquafina, so there's that. And then also released this week is going to be Polite Society, and I cannot wait for this movie. It's going to be so fun.
Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I'm excited about all things anime, specifically Japanese anime. And I also want to discuss 20th Century Girl and Wish Dragon.
I'm Melissa. Recently, I've been obsessed with a lot of movies, but I really love Everything Everywhere All at Once. Can't talk enough about that movie. And if you want to go more on the children's side, I love Turning Red. Upcoming movies, I'm really excited for Joyride, just like Kathy.
Okay, starting off, we're gonna get into the intersection between Asian and Asian American movies and LGBTQ women and immigrants.
I mean, can we start by talking about the half of it and Alice Wu, because like that's also a recent release, that came out in what, like 2020 or something, so that's been relatively recent. This is Cyrano de Bergerac, which is a decades, probably even like centuries at this point, old story that has been remade and done in so many different ways, but by putting an Asian queer lens on it, there's this whole other layer to the dynamics and the relationships that are being cultivated in that. This is something we've talked about in a lot of roundtables. It's about getting people behind the camera, getting people writing the story so that they can take something from their lens and tell that authentically.
I don't know, the chemistry between Ali Carvalho and...
You are talking about Crush,
Crush.
which we could also talk about, which is fair.
Crush is also a fantastic, queer Asian movie.
Who was the Asian lead?
Yeah.
Who was the...
It's Leah Lewis. It's Leah Lewis.
Right. Sorry. That's what I got
No,
wrong.
that's totally fine, because
actually just wrote down Crush after you said the half of it.
Yeah. So like the half of it, I mean, their chemistry is brilliant. I mean, if you grew up Asian, the entire assumption about no one ever being possibly queer, and yeah, I mean, no matter how close you get, no matter how much obviously romantic things you do with someone of the same gender, it gets logged into as like, okay, they're just very close friends. Maybe a bit too close, but just close friends is what happens. And I love the fact that she doesn't pick up on that herself because she has been brought up in church and being indoctrinated into it. But Alice knows, and she knows what is going around here. And yeah, so just a huge fan of it. But I do want to shout out Saving Face even more, because that has something that I never expected to see, and back in 2004, even less, is the fact that the mom has her own romantic life happening and she gets disowned by her father for that. And yeah, I mean, it's really very complicated and very authentic because Alice Wu knows what she's talking about. It's her own lived experience, right? And you can see in the lens and the narrative that she knows what she's talking about. So
This is taking it back to what Kathy's talking about, because it is that intersection between a queer storyline and the Asian American kind of culture that's going on, because both of those are things that, like, there's these expectations about what your life is going to be and what other people are going to react to. There's a lot of similarities there. And so when you put that together into one story, first of all, like from a storytelling perspective, it adds more drama, which always creates more conflict and makes it more entertaining, but it makes it very specific. It feels very relatable. And so people who are kind of in different spaces there find that kind of commonality, which I think is, what we're all looking for.
I actually been watching the cutest, most adorable. The YouTube channel is called like Chinese drama clips, but they're like these LGBT stories that mostly focus on like I believe the Chinese gay men based on the YouTube. But they're so cute because they don't follow the tragic bury your gays kind of like trope. It's just students in China and they're in like regular scenes, and it's not like it's very dramatic. It's melodramatic. It's very like romantic. Like the boy sits shyly while his boyfriend like does push-ups, but he really wants to tell him how he feels. Like it's really dramatic like that, but it's sweet, like in its own way. And I just like watching them interact and have fun without it being about like this, no one is accepting them, or which we know that happens all around the world, but I like stories where they're just like focusing on being characters who happen to be gay instead of it being like this is a gay Chinese show, because they also intersplice like really romantic, like heterosexual relationships into it and all kind of stories. And so I just thought that was really cute, and it just gives you like this really fun, warm, like romance fuzzy feeling. So I like them. So that's what I would add to that.
I love it. That's awesome, Andrew.
I feel like an interesting part of it is that in a lot of American media, we're very like trauma oriented. A lot of our stuff is like sad or just working through previous trauma or whatever. I mean, Asia does that too, but something I feel like, especially with LGBTQ themes, is that they kind of just take what they already do and then just plop gay people into that plot. And it's like not about being gay at all, which I like. I mean, we do need stories about like gay trauma and all of that, but sometimes it's just nice to just have like a regular story. A lot of the time it's not about the trauma, but for America, it's all about the trauma.
Crush is a good one that we mentioned earlier that kind of is more lighthearted, and it's more about like romance and being in high school, like having a girl crush, and and they normalize it a little bit. But you're right that a lot of like the Asian American movies are very traumatic and like working through all of the generational trauma. One person that I like in terms of like intersectionalism, Ali Wong, is hilarious. And she kind of breaks the status quo in terms of her being an Asian American, but also like a woman and very pregnant in her Baby Cobra special. She's on stage and I don't know, like 8 months pregnant, like huge. And she's just cracking jokes, very vulgar. And a bit crude, but also hilarious, and kind of just breaking that norm that women, especially Asian American women, have to be, all perfect and polite and like docile and, just like really good girl, like really good, perfect women. So she does that in a really good way, I feel.
One, when we talk about funny women, I think of like Asian descent. Like I love Lily Singh. I just do. I think she's like super hilarious. She has like a bunch of specials, YouTube specials that I just love. So I just wanted to kind of shout her out. I just love that she's very Indian centered and self-deferential, but not in like a way that I think is gross. But she's also inclusive like of everyone else. Just was really cool.
another person is Chloe Zhao. When you talk about immigrants, you have to talk about her. If you see her older stuff, The song my brother taught me and Nomadland, like they are much more ingrained in reality and like the local culture. But one thing a lot of people missed out on Eternals because it tanked in the box office and people didn't give it a chance is that it is also very much ingrained in local culture. Every single frame that she has, you can see when she pans across the world, soil is one of her central focuses of the camera work. And she's trying to tell us how where we come from, how we're connected to nature and ourselves. And I love that she focuses so much on cultures and where we come from, because that's a major part of the immigrant story. And again, not about trauma. Eternals was about generational trauma for sure, but it's subversive, it's symbolic, and not in your face, which is something I wish we had more. Because if you grew up Asian, you didn't talk about it, you just experienced it. Take it from me, you just experienced it. So if movies showed that, it would be better than talking about it. So yeah.
Asian American Pacific Islander Month is something that's also geared toward kids, because when kids usually think about AAPI month, of popular series is Pokemon. A lot of kids are familiar with Pokemon, specifically Pikachu. But Japanese anime, they're also geared towards other themes, like themes of friendship, themes of survival, and themes of first love. A recent Japanese anime is called Drifting Home, which is about a group of sixth graders trying to find their way home. It's a survival movie, and it's using traditional Japanese anime in which all the images are, the background is still, but the characters, the mouths are moving, and it's using traditional Japanese anime style.
Not a single immigrant story exists which is not about generational trauma. And then in a cute little space on Disney Plus, there's this little show called Miss Marvel. And like she's just so the sweetest like little girl, just existing as herself, being a superhero. I realized that there's a lot of generational trauma to be unpacked. And I am not a fan of the way they fetishize the partition. It is a genuine criticism, but I'm focusing on the positives right now. So like the parents do have issues with her, and but like she's so joyous and cheerful, and it's not about her being bogged down by them, and rather like, you know what, yeah, I'll do my thing, I'm a superhero, you don't get to dictate my life. And really just love the show for that.
The other thing I was going to say about the Chinese dramas that I was telling you about is that I also like that there is no fetishization. Like, it's just like people liking each other. I know like people probably get tired of hearing about that, but it's so cool to just see people being like loved on for who they are and like in sweet situations without it being like, just as someone who literally is dating someone who's Asian, just like hearing about like fetishization and like how annoying that can be as someone feeling like, do you like me, the individual, or do you like, my boxes I kind of check off? I like that these dramas really just focus on, like, you learn about Chinese culture. Some of them are historical, some of them are modern. You learn about like bands that are going on right now, what like high schools are like, what they think of like traveling abroad, and just seeing them in like very sweet, loving positions. And I just love seeing people being loved on. So
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you brought that up. That's actually a great transition to our next topic. Because one difference between Asian films and Asian American films is that the Asian ones don't like exoticize being Asian because it's just the norm. But yeah, that brings us to the next topic. What is the difference between Asian films made in Asia and then Asian American films? Like, what is the difference in styles and culture?
Movies that are Asian movies, I think they emphasize their culture more, because the characters, like, they really don't talk about any anti-racism against Asians. Like, they get to emphasize their culture more in the traditional style. A movie that I want to talk about is 20th Century Girl, because it's a romantic K-drama. Bo Ra, she is played by an Asian actress. The Korean culture is heavily emphasized compared to Asian American movies. Like, they really like talk about like all this racist terms and stuff. The first name is usually emphasized as American, followed by the last name, which is Asian. But Asian movies such as 20th Century Girl, it really emphasizes like the culture even more in a deeper message. The lead actress, connects to audiences in a meaningful way. Her 1999 self is like a 17-year-old high school student who doesn't understand what love really is. It's just a crush. But then it flashes to 20 years later when she is like a young woman and she has this deeper meaning of what love really is. And it really emphasizes Korean culture.
The Exoticization, yeah, that's like the number one flaw of Americans making films about Asians, which does get better now that more Asian Americans are in the creative space instead of just the performative space. For example, Fire Island. If you've seen it, you know Joel Kim Booster, Bowen Yang, they made sure it's not just fetishization. Like they are being themselves, and not just themselves as people, but themselves as Asians specifically. But one thing that's very different stylistically when it comes to direction in directors like Kim Ki-duk and Bong Joon-ho, again, the trauma is a very central part of the upbringing, unfortunately. But instead of it being like the central point of conversation, it's the central point of their characterization. And the subtle distinction is that it's not talked about. It gets expressed through what these characters do rather than what they say. And in the course of the film, they unravel sometimes, they don't sometimes, but what I love is the lack of dialogue, because a lot of Korean and especially Japanese actually content is very muted. It's not much of dialogue, and that's a huge distinction between Asian American and Asian. A lot of Asian American stuff just focuses on talking and talking, and Asians, yeah, we don't talk.
One movie that I especially think of is Big Trouble in Little China. It's a it's a John Carpenter movie. I read an interview where John Carpenter was like, I made this movie as like a joke on stereotypes, or like that the sidekick is the main character and Kurt Russell wasn't supposed to be the main character. So I watched the movie. I don't even remember the Asian character's name because like he didn't really do much. It was all Kurt Russell. All of the like joking about stereotypes just didn't hit, I guess because a white man made it and like he didn't understand how to do it right. And then I go from seeing that, which is like arguably a little racist, to seeing movies made by actual Asian Americans. And like you said, it's the exoticism, because everyone in Big Trouble in Little China were dressed all like almost like superheroes, but it wasn't even about that. And then you see them now and they're all just normal people. It's like they bring the American experience, they bring the bigness of America. Like, you know, we have all the comedy, and like you said, Ali Wong is kind of like real in your face about it, which I guess is more of an American way to do things. But they also bring like all of their Asian experiences with all of like, most of the time it's like parental things and all of their stories of how parents are so much different in Asia than America. Like America makes Asia look so odd and otherworldly, and then you get Asians making like Asian American movies and it just looks like any other American movie. And it's like, why do we do that? Like why do like white Americans make it look so weird when it's just like, just make an American movie, it's the same thing.
Hard, or yeah, they just don't have that lens or perspective for sure.
I look at movies like Train to Busan, #Alive, and All of Us Are Dead to say pretty much echo what you said, Melissa, and echo Atreya. Like, I don't see a bunch of tiger moms running around or kung fu Barbies. It's just normal people who all have different skills, different lives, right? I don't see that stereotype of hard, mean Asian parents who don't love their kids that like the West loves lean into. I see parents like risking their, like, you know, I just see normal people living normal lives, and it's still fascinating and it's still awesome and it's respectful of their culture. So I would say that's probably the number one difference.
Yeah, I guess the biggest difference between Asian movies from Asia and Asian American ones are the lack of discrimination. It's like a very heavy topic that a lot of Asian Americans face, and that's put on screen by directors and writers who are Asian Americans too. Just the constant small traumas that add up. Like each one is not a huge thing, but it's just, you know, like living in Miami. It's not like traumatic or anything, but it's just like a reminder. But like a lot of people speak Spanish here, and they're just like, oh, China. And I'm like, see, yes. But yeah, like from white Americans too, it's just like, oh, like where are you from? And that's put into a lot of Asian American shows, like Beef, and there's not the overarching theme, but there's always like that theme that kind of goes through. And it's the same for other minorities too.
That's where Rush Hour comes in, because it kind of fetishizes the struggle of not being able to communicate, and I'm not a fan of how they do that. Miscommunication is actually just a very troubling day-to-day experience, and making fun of that in the name of making fun of stereotypes is, no, it's not okay. So
Really?
yeah.
I actually Okay, this is a good discussion. I actually loved Rush Hour and thought it was great for diversity.
I mean, yeah, I love Rush Hour too, but like I feel like they really fetishize the struggle instead of making good comedy out of it. Because if you see how Ali Wong does her comedy, she talks about it, and yeah, it's more like awkward. And there's nothing awkward about Rush Hour. That's what I want to say. Like they specifically made it for humor and very American lens on that. So yeah.
I think there is a difference between Asian and Asian Americans because Jackie Chan may seem like a stereotype in some ways, but he's just being himself and he is Asian. But I can see how someone would argue like, he's being too much or whatever. But I think the movie did do a great job in bringing Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan together and in a very hilarious way. So I didn't think that was fetishized at all. Yeah, so that's an interesting point of disagreement that is fine to have.
You want to talk about a lonely island? Try being a Black person who's not the biggest fan of Rush Hour. Like that's a lonely island. But I think Rush Hour was a great movie and attempt, and I did think it was nice to see that bridge because the more I read about history, the more I read that there have been historical partnerships between like Black Americans and Asian Americans that have kind of been muddy through indirect means in a lot of ways. So I liked when people try to like reestablish that. I think for me, it was more like the one infamous scene that people often talk about, at least in like in Black intellectual circles, is like him like kind of picking from the Asian women sitting in like that fan kind of spread. And like to me, that was just kind of like cringy personally. That's where I personally feel like it was a little bit fetishizing, also just because we have issues with Black men doing this to non-Black women all the time in our community. But I don't think it was a movie meant in bad faith. And I do think it was overall a pretty good movie. I just think there are pieces of it that are sort of acceptable fetishizing in my mind from the public right now.
And I think there is a difference between like fetishizing and then just normal, like talking about sex or, in any culture. So I think it's, yeah, an interesting concept. There are some movies from Asia that became household names and incredibly popular in the United States, winning Oscars and just trending, like Parasite and Squid Game. Why do you think those movies and TV shows did so well?
So I find it interesting the amount of things that become popular in America are often things that Korea loves too, but it's almost as if they like it because the West liked it. And with things like Parasite and Squid Game, I almost feel like they get so big because they follow what America likes. And what America likes is like horror and killing and all of that. We love death games. We love like a murder mystery. That's not to say Asia doesn't either, but I almost never see like romance or comedy like come over to America as much. And I'll use my parents as an example because my parents don't know anything about Asian media. Almost everything they talk to me about is something like Parasite or like Squid Game. Like it's a horror movie, they're killing people. And I think that's just because Americans love action, maybe. They love suspense. I don't know. Maybe there's a different romance culture too that doesn't quite make it to America. But I really do think that most of the time it's like an action horror thing that becomes big over here.
Yeah, no, that is a good point. Americans love competition too, which is, yeah, what Squid Game was, at least.
I've been in anime discussions where the same thing got brought up. Like what people think of as anime, like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z, is like one sliver of all the stuff that happens. There's all kind of stuff that's like slice of life, romance that actually sells just as well, that never crosses over as well or gets as much attention. It's always like a Naruto that becomes like internationally renowned. But like, things that are more like centered on like more cultural, you know what I mean? Like never quite seem to have the same balance. And I think it's always because it's a boy punching things is what we like joke about. Like when a boy punches things, that's very exciting in the Western world.
And the interesting with Naruto is he's Japanese, but he also has like a blonde hair too. Along this vein, Pokemon did do well. It was, competition with the Pokemon and everything. And that trended a long time ago in the 90s, but luckily there was no death and killing in that one.
As Melissa was talking about the success of Squid Game and these competition things and the fact that like American culture that we just love. We love competition, we love death, we love horror, we love all these things. I was thinking about like Hunger Games and how like the Hunger Games franchise, like the books and the movies and everything, that was inspired by Battle Royale, which is an Asian thing. So I feel like there's also this kind of like chicken and the egg situation where it's like we Americans have this very centered thing about like, oh, we came up with this idea, we did this. And so people then find out, no, that was actually based on something that came out years, decades ago in Asia that was this story. And we just brought it over here and Americanized it and made it into the Hunger Games and marketed it that way. And then Squid Game came over and Squid Game was like, oh, it's like the Hunger Games, but it's like more horror and it's a different kind of competition and that kind of thing. And so I feel like there's also this like, we're kind of always mixed up together with what the Asian market is doing. We're paying attention to them in the same way they're paying attention to us, and it's creating this kind of like, you know, avenue for both of us to kind of profit off of it. And I feel like that is one of the reasons that we have started to, you know, bring more Asian media into our day-to-day and into the zeitgeist over here. And I think that also has to do with just the supply and demand of culture and how like Americans want more things like this. They get a taste of something and they're like, oh, I liked this, so maybe I would like this too. And that's what leads to things like Parasite being Oscar nominated and winning, you know, something that 10 years ago probably would have just been this kind of cult Asian thing that like no one was watching. But because we have more of an appetite for indie and diverse stories, people are more open to that, and theaters are more open to that and bringing it into a bigger space, and that increases the popularity in that way. So I think that's kind of just in general, the industry over the years has become more and more open to that. So,
and with the Oscars and you know, Parasite winning, I think like the media, like members of the Academy have been more aware of Oscars so white. So I think they're a little bit kind of being like, oh, we can't 100% just nominate Top Gun.
I wanted to talk about Wish Dragon because the plot is kind of similar to Disney's Aladdin. So they made it Chinese because all the cast members, they're of Chinese descent. So it has the lead female role, which is Li Na, which is by a Chinese woman actress. So the fun fact about Wish Dragon is that they emphasize Chinese American cultural elements. Like the Wish Dragon is based on like the magical dragon himself, which brings like strong representation of Chinese culture. But because it's a kids movie, they want to make it more exciting. So they brought a magical dragon that grants wishes and has a little comic relief to it, similar to the genie from Aladdin. So they're trying to teach the importance of Chinese culture, but at the same time want to get like a little more comic relief to it.
I do want to talk about the gap in what content gets popular with respect to age groups, because America is the land of Simpsons, but somehow when it comes to animated content, it's always Studio Ghibli and stuff that's literally about children. You will not see anime about adult characters trending in America. Again, the land of Family Guy and Simpsons people. Like, I don't know how that gap happens, but that does happen. And on the other hand, when it comes to live action things, it's always the horror movies and stuff like that. Not a lot of YA things trend there. Another thing that I feel like Americans fetishize a lot is the Asian idea of competition. It's not a healthy thing to grow up with. And they're like, they're good at math. They always compete for exams. Let's make a big deal out of it, make it an extravaganza and create Squid Games. Like, it's kind of exoticization happening again. They just pick and choose. When you see the horror movies that trend, it's things like Train to Busan or zombie things, but the movies by Park Chan-wook and Kim Ki-duk barely actually trend in America. And those are much more existential horror films. It's very cherry picking, honestly. It's just like, we know what we like. Anything else? Yeah, let's not talk about it. And that's not genuine representation, honestly.
I think one thing that watching Asian media that's made by Asian people, whether it's of Asian descent or people still currently living in Asia, I think one of the things that it does is fights against the model minority myth that I don't think everyone always recognizes as a negative thing, but I think it fights against it because it shows like Asian people being human. They're not like superhuman, calculus machines or computer science destined people, right? Like they're people who have all kind of jobs. Like one thing I used to always say when people would weaponize model minority myths against people is, I'm like, well, in Asia, who's bringing up food? Who teaches them, right? Who's the nurses? Like if everybody has to be this narrow set of STEM fields and high achieving people, and I don't even like that term because it makes it seem like other pairs are not high achieving. I'm like, where does their where do they get to be human? Where does our art come from? Where does their poetry come from, right? If we're always portraying them as this is what needs to happen, and then erasing like groups that aren't necessarily doing as financially well in America who happen to be of Asian descent, like relations, I believe is one of the categories of people. I think that's what like it does, and I like seeing like a more humanized, like even with a lot of the Bollywood movies coming out. I like seeing a more humanized content, right? That's like showing that they have all these like things. They're everyone, they're just like us, they're different. They have their own culture, but they also share universal humanity, right? So I like that. And I also just like seeing women in Asia getting to be broader specifically, right? Like not just damsels or your like Kung Fu Barbie dream. They're like getting to be human, right? And I use that term derisively because it's a trope that literally comes up in writing. Like the idea that someone is this small, but they're going to like knock the rock over into a wall with her mystic kung fu, right? Like it's just like it's like so silly. It's just your dream of what Asian women are, and I just like seeing them in more fulfilling roles. I like seeing new like all types of body sizes. Everybody's not thin and conventionally looking a certain way. So I just like that for what I've been seeing recently. So and also seeing like a lot of Asian Americans feel more comfortable talking about, hey, everything is not perfect. These are things we're dealing with. We are dealing with anti-Asian rhetoric, and we're going to talk about it. We're not going to like suffer in silence. So I like seeing that too.
So yeah, we covered some interesting themes such as the fetishization of Asian women in particular, and like just the glorification of violence. But then there's things in the other realm that are kind of even more negative, more deliberately harmful or disparaging, like yellow face and whitewashing. So who can provide examples of some of that's been happening?
I mean, do we want to go all the way back to Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's? Because my gosh, talk about an offensive portrayal that was completely meant to be there for comedic purposes. Like that character serves no other purpose other than to be a joke stereotype, and fully delivers. And that is like a film that I do adore, but there is such a stain on that film because of that like you can't just like unabashedly love that film and like appreciate everything about it, because there's this glaring problem in it. And I feel like that's something that over the years, the more that you become more socially aware of that kind of stuff, you start to take out different films that you used to love, and you just can't love them in the same way anymore. And that's one of those that's like, so it's that one. It's like, Yul Brynner and The King and I. There's so much of this yellow face kind of thing that just permeates cinematic history in America. So
I do want to bring up Aloha that came out not too long ago with Emma Stone. And it's this white actress who plays an Asian American in Hawaii, half Asian. I did not watch the movie. I refused to, but like this stuff is still happening. And like, I think there was some stuff where they tried to make her look more Asian with the eyes. I was like, oh my gosh, this is not just Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I did see the movie, and there's even like comments in it that like mocks the fact that they're like, you? And it's like, of course she's not. Like it's another thing where it becomes this like comic relief, and it's not really like a huge part of the character either. It's not even like she's like leaning into that side of her culture and they like really explore that. It's just like, it's literally them trying to check a box, but they're checking a box with someone who doesn't check the box. So it's I don't know. I don't have anything else to say about that.
That's so ridiculous on so many levels. Wow. Okay.
I actively choose not to like watch these things, like at least the modern ones. Like I'll go back to the old ones just to see like what they were thinking back then. And a lot of the time they weren't thinking. But so a lot of my like knowledge is from the older stuff, but I feel like everyone knows that. It's the fact that it's still happening that's tiring, but I like actively choose not to watch that, so I don't know too much. So yeah.
Ghost in the Shell is another one that was, originally. Andrew, do you want to get into it?
You can not dislike an actress if you don't want to, and you can still say maybe a movie was a good story, but I just hate when someone is just like, oh, don't do that to her. I'm like, no, it was a bad thing to do, and she thought it was like perfectly fine. And if the movie didn't flop or something, I don't think it did, but I'm like, it always kills me. They only feel sorry if it flops, or right? Like they only don't care when it like the backlash is so bad that the movie doesn't do well. That's when they're like, I'm sorry, it was a bad choice. I don't know what I was thinking, but if the movie does well, they don't care. They just like right up to the sunset. And so I just think I just want us to think about that going forward. It's just that whitewashing is bad. M. Night Shyamalan is still the worst for the Avatar movie, but whitewashing is bad, and we shouldn't like sometimes carve out exceptions because we like a certain actress or a singer, Ariana Grande. I'm looking at you, just because, right? We like that person. Like if they're Asian fishing, as some people like to call it now, or yellow faces, I would always call it. It's bad, and if they're trying to portray a person that they're not, and they're qualified Asian actresses, like saying, "Hey, I want to work," then it's a bad thing to do. That's just my take.
No, I love it. And then you brought up, yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender and M. Night Shyamalan. They are making a new one, and it is supposed to star Asian actors. So that's a very exciting thing. They kind of like Hollywood is writing them wrong through a different director and everything.
Yeah, you want to talk about Death Note? They didn't even try to like stick to the material. They didn't even look at casting for Asian actors. They literally just saw the first Caucasian people on the street and they were like, come and act in our movie. It's literally an anime, and no one cared. Another harmful stereotype that's I'm not sure it's still very rectified is the math nerd in high school. Not every Asian is a fan of math. Like this is why I'm in love with Never Have I Ever, because like Devi is such a good student, but it's not about that. And she does struggle, and they're showing how having a social life is struggling. But no,
Yeah.
not a math nerd. Like, please move on. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh
that's
my
my
goodness. I'm so
comment.
happy you brought up Never Have I Ever. It's so funny. She has such a temper. She's like a normal Asian American kid who just like has a lot of hormones too. And she also is high achieving, but that's not like her main thing.
I also love Never Have I Ever, and I feel like we're in this really great Mindy Kaling era, and I'm all for it. When you do have this thing where you have white actors playing Asian characters, not only is it offensive representation on screen, it's also denying the people who should have that role or could have that role a job. You know, it's not just, oh, it's bad that it's on screen and we're seeing that and it's not accurate. It's also like, but that person got paid to do that. They're getting profit from that. Their career might be even getting bigger because of that. And there could have been a qualified person. There probably were like 10 or 20 qualified people over here who actually fit what you're looking for that character, and they didn't get a chance to do it, and so now their career is less and that person's career is up here. So that's the other side of that I just wanted to point
Yeah,
out as
I love
well.
that. They're not looking at a talent pool that they don't know. Like a lot of Hollywood is kind of connections and who you know, and they're like, Emma Stone, sure. Let's just grab her. Or Scarlett Johansson.
I mean, they both really need work. Clearly, they don't have enough projects available to them. So
I know, seriously, like Black Widow wasn't enough. But yes.
So since I've been a fan of animation, I can clearly tell the difference between Asians and Caucasians just by looking at their faces. Like animation styles, like they use like really like they use like almond shaped eyes, you know, for the Asian characters. You can tell that their hair is naturally black because the person is Asian, and they have like naturally like, you know, color in their skin. Like you can tell that a person is like of Asian descent, like this discrimination, like Americans playing Asian characters. And you know, how can you tell the difference if a Caucasian is playing an Asian? Because you can tell by looking at their faces, like you can tell their faces even in animation styles.
Yeah, that is true. And like a lot of Asians have very pale skin, like white skin, even, you know, some are even paler than white people. And yeah, it's just like a completely different race and you can't just swap them. For
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. I mean, if there's an animator who is of Asian descent, then they have a different animation style. Like they create the characters, like look at their faces and you can tell who is Asian and Caucasian.
My best friend took like this Asian animation class, and one of the things they talked about is I guess there are a lot of Asian fans of anime who are confused that Americans will think certain characters are not meant to be Asian because I guess to them they all seem Asian. And I was like, I just find it hard to look at Sailor Moon and you tell me like I'm dumb if I don't realize she's Asian. Because in the story, even you're saying that she's what inspired the Greek goddess, look like for the moon and stuff, even in her own story. I'm like, so you had to know her blonde pigtails and blue eyes. would be like confusing if she's meant to be, right? Like, but in the same breath, I'm like, I'm not saying they can't be. It's just like I do think sometimes as the argument in the class was Western people just project, right? So we're the ones who can't see that this character is clearly Asian when they are. When I'm like, I'm not saying I didn't recognize her as Asian. I'm just saying I can see how she has sort of ambiguous features.
Let's end with kind of a quick game. Like we can go around and like just listing favorite Asian American movies or TV shows that we didn't necessarily get into yet. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
The Farewell.
Always be my maybe.
Ooh, good choice. Of course, you
Nari.
went.
Shen Wang, he's a new comedian who did a stand-up alongside.
Yeah.
Hashtag
I mean,
alive.
I did mention Crazy Rich Asians earlier. We didn't really talk about it, but just like in addition to everything Awkwafina, everything Henry Golding. Henry Golding was introduced to the world, and we got a bunch of Henry Golding things that came out after that, and I am ready for more.
Sure, Henry Golding is great. And Awkwafina, Nora from Queens is hilarious.
Searching.
Right, The Last Dragon.
R.
Yeah. Yeah, I have thoughts about that. Okay, let's not get into it, but yeah.
Train to Busan.
Mindy Kaling stuff.
In fact, Sex Lives of College Girls, I don't know if you guys are watching it, but it's amazing. Yeah, in fact, the Asian character in there is the least studious of them. And I love that Mindy's like, yeah, you know what? I hate stereotypes. I'm going to go the other way around.
She's great. Oh my gosh.
Johnny.
And then we've got a couple upcoming movies that have like supporting characters being played by some of our favorites. So we have Awkwafina as Scuttle in the new Little Mermaid. So that's going to be a huge movie. And Barbie is also going to be big, and we've got Simu Liu in that one. So not lead roles per se, but still very heavily featured in these big blockbuster type movies. So all for it.
Yeah,
and the good plays.
Right?
Yes, he is a Ken. I don't even know how many Kens there are in that. I'm so excited for that movie. It's going to be chaos and amazing. And I'm excited for
that casting.
And Joyride, which I mentioned briefly.
Oh yeah. Everything Stephanie show.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about good plays by Manny Jacinto. Like amazing casting here.
Yeah,
such a relief after Raj from Big Bang Theory.
And then Bonnie, I know you like Turning Red. That one was a good one.
Yeah, and since we talked about the half of it, the next Pixar movie that's coming out, Elemental, Leah Lewis, the star of the half of it, is going to be the lead in that. And I wish more people were talking about that movie because it's Pixar. Why are more people not talking about this movie?
Oh my god, Elemental! I saw the trailer in theaters. Oh yeah, Air, Fire, Water, Earth. Like they're coming to life.
And I don't know why people aren't talking about it. There's a new Pixar movie. How do people not know? Fine.
Okay, they can hear it here.
Yeah, one last shout out, Bo and Yang. Everything SNL. Every time he showed up, every time he shows up on Weekend Update, it's like every person.
I know every new. He did Jafar recently, and it was perfect. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Also, Joel Kim Booster. If you haven't watched Psychosexual, do it. If you're into stand up, it's the perfect set. He literally picks out a straight white man from the audience, and he's like, "You'll be my anchor. After every section, I'm gonna talk to you about how you are feeling, whether you feel included in my set that's specifically about Asians and gay people." It's hilarious. The crowd work.
Amazing.
And then, why did you like the?
Firstly, my favorite line from the show is there's a moment where another character tries to school Stephen Yeun about how he should feel better and everything. And he has an outburst. He's like, Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds.
Did you feel so seen in that moment, Troy?
Yeah, you know how I was talking about them talking too much about Americans making everything bigger than life? That was my moment because, yeah, you need quieter, you need more. It's not easy to talk about things, and he was being constantly told to talk about things. He's like, nope, Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds. And then in the finale, they just get high and talk to each other a lot, and everything gets resolved. And so mushrooms work on Eastern minds. You're not wrong.
That's so funny. And then I think Melissa and Andrew, you know more of the Asian movies. So any recommendations or favorites there?
I love All of Us Are Dead. I really think like people should watch that. It's
that was a good
really
show.
Cool, especially as a metaphor for, I guess, the problem of bullying that's happening in like Korean high schools right now, like that they're kind of cracking down on. So really, really good show.
If we're going shows, one of my favorites is Goblin. I think it has a different name in America. I'm not 100% sure, but it has Gong Yu in it, the same guy from Train to Busan. If you see a trend of things that I like, it's probably because he's in it.
There's a pattern there.
There's a pattern. So pretty much anything that he's in, go ahead and watch that.
I feel the same way about Gemma Chan. So.
Oh yeah, Gemma Chan, I love her. She's so classy.
Who was also in Raya and the Last Dragon. So like we mentioned that earlier. We mentioned Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah,
We mentioned Eternals. Like
and Eternals, yeah.
And Eternals, yeah.
The Humans, I think. The robot.
Yeah, the show.
Yeah. I also want to
Also
bring up
Hirokazu Koreeda.
The Extraordinary Attorney Woo. That one was a good lawyer show.
That's a fun one.
Physical 100, which is also another like Korean movie that really appeals to Americans and in the world. It's like
I think that's a competition show, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like Squid Games, except it's obviously reality. No one dies, but they have all these competitions where people get eliminated.
Squid Games without the horror, you're saying?
Without the actual death and the horror, yeah.
And more buff people.
I think they have 2 white guys and a black guy in that show.
There's Disney Plus, I think it's a series coming on that's like called like American Born Chinese or something like that. It's like Michelle Yeoh and a bunch of people. I'm also excited for that one too. All things Michelle Yeoh as well.
Of course. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Right from there, it's like everything.
Oh my gosh, I love it. All of these good movie suggestions for people.
Since you were talking about Slice of Life, check out Hirokazu Koreeda. He's a Korean director. You like his stuff, you're into Slice of Life movies. It's not always competition and aggression.
And if you like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, please check out House of Flying Daggers, because that one I feel like goes under the radar, whereas Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, everyone's talking about it, and that one is just brilliant. So
excellent. Okay, well, yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you like our stuff, subscribe to our YouTube and also check out Incluvie.com. Thanks, everyone. I think is, an interesting concept. Okay. Oh, we lost the trail. He ghosted us. Should we wait a second for him to come back, or just? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, let's wait a second. What just happened?
Wow, I don't know. Yeah, my network just gave away. It just gave up. Wow. Okay. Let's resume.
All right, we've got our bloopers for this one.
Hopefully that doesn't happen again.
We'll have some people being loved on, so.
Let's just.
Why does it keep happening?
Let's just continue. Let's not address it. I don't know. My internet, yeah.
Okay, are you good, Atreya?
Are you good now?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we're good to go. Yeah.
Okay.